My hands shook as I watched the bulldozer tear through concrete meant to protect my sister. Karen thought her HOA badge let her destroy any eyesore, even a wheelchair ramp. What this power-tripping president didn't know: the disabled woman she targeted wasn't just my sister. She was the state's highest-ranking official. By sunrise, our quiet street would swarm with news crews and state troopers. This is how one entitled Karen dismantled her own life, and an entire corrupt HOA. The bright yellow piece of paper stuck to our front door made my blood boil. It was the 5th HOA violation notice this month, all about my sister Sarah's wheelchair ramp. I crumpled it up and tossed it into my growing collection of Karen Thompson's official warnings. Behind me, Sarah's gloved hands gripped her chair's joystick, still learning the muscle memory of this new life. As the electric motor hummed up the ramp, "Another love letter from our wonderful neighbor?" Sarah asked with a tired smile. The dark circles under her eyes showed how exhausted she was from her new job, but she never complained. Not about work, not about the car accident that put her in the wheelchair 6 months ago, and not even about Karen's constant harassment. "You'd think being HOA president would keep her busy enough without stalking our house," I said, watching through our kitchen window as Karen stood in her driveway, taking pictures of our ramp with her phone. Her perfectly highlighted hair and designer workout outfit couldn't hide the look of pure spite on her face. I remember the day we installed the ramp. We had followed every rule in the book, hired a licensed contractor, got the proper permits from the city, and even used the exact shade of gray paint that matched our house trim. Only later would we discover Karen's HOA fines funded her pool renovations. But at that moment, she showed up before the concrete was even dry, waving the HOA rulebook like it was some kind of magic wand. Section 8, paragraph 3 clearly states that all external modifications must be approved by the board, she had said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We have to maintain our property values, you understand?" What really got under my skin was how Karen kept accidentally scheduling the HOA meetings about our ramp for times when Sarah couldn't attend. Not that Sarah could have gone anyway. She was too busy running the state. "Yeah, that's right, my sister isn't just any homeowner, she's the governor." But we'd kept that quiet in the neighborhood, wanting to maintain some privacy during her recovery. Last week, I caught Karen measuring the ramp with a tape measure at 6 a.m. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just doing her duty as HOA president. I started documenting everything after that, taking videos, saving her notices, and keeping a detailed log of every interaction. Something in my gut told me we'd need it. This morning was different, though. As I helped Sarah into her car for her physical therapy appointment, I noticed Karen huddled with 2 men in suits near her house, pointing at our ramp and gesturing dramatically. One of them was writing in a notebook, and the other was taking more pictures. "I don't like this," I told Sarah. "Maybe it's time we let them know who they're really dealing with." Sarah shook her head. "I won't use my position to get special treatment. We'll handle this the right way, through proper channels." But as I watched Karen's triumphant smile while she handed thick manila envelopes to the men in suits, I couldn't shake the feeling that following the rules might not be enough this time. I pulled out my phone and started recording, catching Karen's voice carried across our yards on the morning breeze. "Yes, we'll need that bulldozer here first thing tomorrow morning. The board has already approved the removal." My heart stopped. They wouldn't really tear down a wheelchair ramp, would they? As Sarah's car disappeared around the corner, I rushed inside to check our security cameras and grab our folder of permits. But what I found in our files would change everything, a discovery that would make Karen wish she'd never heard of us. I was eating breakfast when I heard the rumbling of heavy machinery outside our house. My spoon clattered against the bowl as I rushed to the window, and my heart nearly stopped. There was Karen, standing in our front yard with her signature red blazer and perfectly styled blonde hair, pointing at our wheelchair ramp while a man in a construction hat nodded along. I grabbed my phone to record everything as I ran outside. The morning sun was barely up, and most of our neighbors were still asleep. A bright yellow bulldozer sat in our driveway, its metal blade gleaming menacingly. 2 workers in orange vests were measuring the ramp with bright yellow tape measures, while Karen clutched a stack of papers to her chest, like they were made of gold. "What do you think you're doing?" I called out, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. Karen's Botox-stiff smile stretched as she walked towards me in her designer heels that sank slightly into our fresh grass. "Oh good, you're home," she chirped. "I have here an emergency order from the HOA board. This structure is in direct violation of Community Guidelines, Section 4.23. She waved a paper in my face but pulled it back before I could grab it. I took a deep breath, just like Sarah taught me during her campaign speeches. Karen, we submitted all the proper paperwork. We have approval from the city. The city isn't the HOA, dear, she cut me off, her smile never wavering. And as president of the board, it's my duty to maintain our community standards. This ramp is an eyesore that's bringing down property values. Just look at how it clashes with the neighborhood aesthetic. The bulldozer revved its engine, and I felt my stomach drop. I pulled up the property maps on my phone that Sarah had made me save, showing our property lines and permits. This is illegal. You can't just demolish someone's property without proper notice or a court order. But Karen just laughed, a high-pitched sound that made my skin crawl. Notice was given 3 weeks ago via certified mail. We have the receipt right here. She pulled out another paper, showing a signature I'd never seen before. I frantically dialed Sarah's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Of course, she was in that closed-door budget meeting today. I tried her assistant, her security team, anyone I could think of, but nobody was answering. The construction workers started placing orange cones around our driveway. One of them looked uncertain, checking his paperwork multiple times. I noticed him whispering to his colleague, pointing at something that didn't seem right. If you do this, I warned, my voice growing stronger, you'll be hearing from our lawyers. This is a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I started live streaming everything on my phone, making sure to catch every detail. Karen's smile faltered for a second. My covenants override any so-called disability rights. This isn't Washington, sweetheart. It's my neighborhood. No, exempt from federal law, I shouted, loud enough that lights started coming on in neighboring houses. Our elderly neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, poked his head out the front door, then disappeared back inside when he saw Karen. But she had already turned to the bulldozer operator, giving him a sharp nod. The machine roared to life, its treads crunching against our driveway. I watched in horror as the blade lowered towards the ramp that had taken us weeks to get properly installed. Last chance, Karen, I said, my phone steady in my hands. You're making a huge mistake. She turned back to me, her eyes cold despite her smile. The only mistake was allowing this monstrosity to be built in the first place. Sometimes people need to learn that rules exist for a reason. The bulldozer's engine roared louder, its blade lowering with menacing precision. Karen's smile widened as the machine inched forward, a woman tasting power she'd craved since losing the 2018 board election. The horrible screech of metal on concrete pierced the air as the blade caught the edge of the ramp. I was still recording as chunks of our carefully constructed ramp began to crumble. What they didn't notice was Mr. Rodriguez had returned with his own camera, and more neighbors were gathering, phones raised. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah's head of security. Stay calm, keep recording. Help is 3 minutes out. I smiled for the first time that morning, watching Karen direct the destruction of our ramp like a conductor at an orchestra. She was so focused on her victory that she didn't notice the black SUVs turning onto our street, or the distant sound of sirens growing closer. Sometimes the biggest mistakes come from the smallest bits of missing information, like not knowing your seemingly ordinary neighbor is actually one of the most powerful people in the state. In 8 minutes, Karen would regret ever touching that ramp. I'll never forget the moment our quiet suburban street turned into chaos. Just as Karen was busy high-fiving her HOA cronies over their successful removal of the eyesore, the concrete chunks rained down like broken promises. She didn't notice the black SUVs gliding past Mr. Rodriguez's azaleas, or the growing crowd of neighbors raising their phones. My hands were shaking as I kept recording. This was going to be good. The look on Karen's face changed from smug satisfaction to confusion as 3 state police cruisers pulled up, followed by 5 identical black government vehicles. The neighbors who had been peeking through their curtains all day now spilled onto their front lawns. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. What is all this? Karen demanded, her voice cracking slightly. This is a private neighborhood matter. That's when Sarah's lead security detail stepped out, scanning the area before opening the back door of the center SUV. The street fell dead silent as my sister rolled out in her wheelchair, wearing her official governor's blazer and the stern expression I'd only seen her use during major press conferences. Actually, Mrs. Thompson, Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong, this became a state matter the moment you violated federal disability protection laws. She wheeled forward, her security team moving in perfect formation around her. Not to mention destroying state property without authorization. Karen's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. State property? She squeaked. Yes, Sarah continued, pulling out her phone. Would you like to see the deed? Or should we discuss the Americans with Disabilities Act first? I'm particularly familiar with Title II, having just signed new state protections last month. The crowd of neighbors grew larger. I spotted at least a dozen phones recording everything. Mrs. Jenkins from across the street was already live on Facebook. But the HOA bylaws clearly state. Karen stumbled backward, clutching her precious violation notices. Interesting you should mention those, Sarah cut in, motioning to her assistant, who stepped forward with a thick binder. My legal team has been reviewing your HOA's bylaws all afternoon. Would you like to know what we found? I watched as Karen's HOA board members started quietly backing away from her. Smart move. Multiple violations of state housing laws, discriminatory practices, and, Sarah paused for effect, irregular financial records going back 3 years. The crowd gasped. I zoomed in on Karen's face with my phone as it turned whiter than those violation notices she loved so much. I didn't know, Karen sputtered, that I was the governor, Sarah finished for her, or that bulldozing a disabled person's access ramp without proper notice or permits is a federal offense. 2 state investigators stepped forward, notebooks in hand. Behind them, I could see news vans starting to pull up at the end of our street. Mrs. Thompson, one investigator spoke up, we'll need you to come with us to answer some questions about today's events and these financial discrepancies. As Karen was led away, still mumbling about property values and HOA bylaws, Sarah turned to address the gathered crowd. She looked every bit the leader she was, even sitting in her wheelchair surrounded by the rubble of our ramp. My fellow neighbors, she began, today we have an opportunity to discuss what community really means. She gestured to the destroyed ramp. This isn't just about me or my access to home. This is about every person's right to live with dignity in their own community. The faces in the crowd showed shame, anger, and most importantly, understanding. As cameras flashed, I spotted Mrs. Chen clutching decades-old HOA violation slips. Our first clue this fight would ignite a national movement. The morning after the bulldozing incident, I woke up to my phone buzzing like crazy. Our security camera footage had gone viral overnight, and news vans were already lined up outside our house. But that wasn't even the craziest part. My old high school friend, who became a civil rights lawyer, had called with shocking news about Karen's past HOA violations. I couldn't believe my eyes when I opened the files he sent. Karen had been sued 3 times before for similar stunts in other neighborhoods, but she'd always managed to settle quietly and move on to terrorize a new HOA. This time she'd picked the wrong house on the wrong day. Sarah, being the amazing governor she is, didn't just get mad, she got organized. She called an emergency press conference right on our front lawn, with the destroyed ramp pieces still scattered behind her. The reporters went wild when she pulled out a stack of papers showing how Karen had broken not just federal disability laws, but also violated 17 different state housing regulations. But here's where it gets really interesting. Our elderly neighbors started coming forward one by one. Mrs. Chen from across the street revealed how Karen had forced her to remove her medicinal garden. Mr. Rodriguez showed documentation of how she'd fined him for having a wheelchair lift installed for his veteran father. Even the quiet Baker family spoke up about being threatened with fines for their autistic son's sensory-friendly playground equipment. The neighborhood I'd known for years suddenly felt different. People were talking to each other, sharing stories and standing together. Karen tried to call an emergency HOA meeting to address these unfounded accusations, but nobody showed up except her 2 loyal followers from the board. Meanwhile, Sarah had invited disability rights advocates to our house, and half the neighborhood came to learn about accessible housing rights. Just when we thought things couldn't get more intense, someone leaked Karen's HOA financial records. Turns out she'd been using the fines she collected to pay for her own home renovations, claiming they were board-approved community improvements. The HOA's lawyer quit on the spot, and 3 board members resigned through angry emails that somehow found their way to the local news. Karen still wouldn't back down. She showed up at our house the next morning with a cease and desist letter, demanding we stop spreading lies about her. What she didn't expect was to walk right into a meeting between Sarah and the state housing commissioner, who was very interested in reviewing every HOA decision Karen had made in the last 5 years. The look on Karen's face when she realized her HOA reign of terror was crumbling around her was almost worth all the drama. Almost. But the best part was watching our neighbors put up support accessible housing signs in their yards, one by one, until Karen's house stood alone without one. The news helicopters circling overhead captured it all, and by sunset, our story had made national headlines. As I watched more neighbors gather on our lawn that evening, sharing stories and planning a new inclusive HOA, I couldn't help but wonder, how had one wheelchair ramp sparked such a massive change? But as the concrete dust settled, I realized, we'd just given Karen exactly what she deserved. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages from neighbors sharing their own HOA horror stories. My phone kept buzzing with news reporters wanting to talk about what happened, but what really caught my attention was the email from Mrs. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor who Karen had fined last month for having a garden gnome. She had proof of Karen breaking other laws too. I printed out every HOA rule and spent the whole day highlighting the parts Karen had ignored. Sarah's legal team found out Karen never even filed the right papers to become HOA president. She just took over when the old president moved away, and nobody dared to question her. The more we dug, the more dirt we found. Then something amazing happened. Our story reached Tommy Chin, a famous YouTube lawyer who makes videos about unfair housing rules. He flew in to meet with Sarah and offered to help us sue Karen and the HOA for free. His video about our case got millions of views in just one day. Karen tried to save herself by calling another emergency HOA meeting, but this time was different. Instead of her usual empty room with 2 sleepy neighbors, the community center was packed. People who'd never spoken up before shared stories of Karen's bullying. Mr. Jenkins showed pictures of his daughter's treehouse that Karen made him tear down. The Wilson family talked about their Christmas lights Karen said were too bright. Sarah rolled up to the microphone and didn't just talk about the ramp, she revealed her big plan. She'd been working on a new law to protect homeowners from HOA abuse. The room erupted in cheers when she announced it would be called the Right to Home Happiness Act. But the best part? Our security camera footage showed Karen had lied on official papers about getting permission to bulldoze the ramp. That's when her own lawyer dropped the case. 2 days later, we watched Karen pack up her prized rose bushes, the ones she'd forced everyone else to copy, and move away. The new HOA board is amazing. They turned the old violations office into a community help center. Now, instead of sending fines, they send welcome baskets to new neighbors. They even started a program to help elderly residents with home repairs. Sarah's ramp got rebuilt, but better than before. Local artists painted it with beautiful flowers and installed cool lights that make it glow softly at night. Kids from the neighborhood actually think it's the prettiest thing on our street. Last week, Sarah held a barbecue for the whole neighborhood in our backyard. Watching everyone laugh and share food where Karen once stood yelling about grass height rules made me realize something huge. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes. Remember that bulldozer company? They now offer free ramp installations to disabled residents across the state, and their CEO personally apologized to Sarah. They even started a scholarship fund for students studying disability rights. The biggest surprise came yesterday. I got promoted to run the state's new homeowner protection office. My first job? Teaching other neighborhoods how to turn their HOAs from bullies into helpers. Sarah says we're just getting started, and you know what? Looking at how much has changed in just 1 year, I believe her. Our story even made it into school textbooks as an example of standing up to unfair rules. But the real victory isn't in the headlines or new laws. It's in the little things, like seeing Mrs. Rodriguez's garden gnome army grow bigger every week, or watching kids play freely on their front lawns without fear of violation notices. Karen's old house just sold last week. The new family has 3 kids, 2 dogs, and guess what's in their front yard? A wheelchair ramp for their grandmother. Nobody complained. Instead, 5 neighbors showed up to help them unpack. That's when I knew we didn't just change an HOA, we changed minds. Today, Karen's old house displays a hand-painted sign, "Disabled Neighbors Welcome." The artist? Sarah's former physical therapist, and our new HOA president.